what's going on, guys? Baseball Stud 294 here. Now today I'm going to be showing you a gun that I've had actually the entire summer. I've just been so busy with lots of different things and lots of changes going on in my life that I haven't had time to really post much content on my channel. So I apologize for that. I've had both good and bad things going on, so maybe I'll update you guys that on that topic in a separate video. But jumping right into it, as you can tell, this is a review of the HK416. Now it's the DBOYS brand, so it is not a VFC. And the reason I chose that was because I did not want to pay the heavy price ticket for the VFC branded products. So and also I really just wanted the look and the styling of the 416. Being that I have a 417, I'm starting to fall in love with the HK branding, so, and the HK I guess receiver sets and styling. So yeah, but jumping right into it, I'm going to talk quickly about some of the stuff this gun does come with. I have some of it already listed, or actually right here on screen. So as you can tell, I have a Magpul PTS stock on it right now, but it does come from the factory with either an LE stock and it's wired to the front, or they have an option to where it can be wired to the rear and they'll provide a crane stock for you. But since I wanted to put on the PTS stock to give it more of a SOCOM feel, I had to choose it to be wired to the front just to make it a little bit easier. I know I can find a LiPo battery that will fit inside the stock, however, it's just easier this way, and that allows me to have a larger battery. So it does come with that. It comes with, as you can see in the front, a black, just a pretty standard foregrip, and you know, it's one of the ones where you just twist the bottom and it'll tighten, and then you twist it the other direction to loosen it. The other things it does come with, as I'll show you right here, this gun actually comes with quite a bit. It comes with a PEC box and a 1200 milliamp 9.6 volt battery with a mini Tamiya type connector. Now I'm not a fan of these kinds of PEC boxes just because they're so massive, and if I set this on top of here, look how much room that actually takes up on the receiver. Or the front handguard. So I'm not a big fan of that, but I'm working on, I wish I had the other PEC box that I use. I use it with a flat 11.1 LiPo battery, but anyways, it does come with this, and it does come with the battery, so it technically gives you everything you need to get started. The other thing, sorry, I keep walking away from the camera here. The other things it does come with is it's got a barrel extension. So as you can see, I have a longer inner barrel right now. It's a Type bore 6.03 chromed inner barrel. So typically, if you wanted to give this more of an IAR look, which of course you'd be missing the longer rail or the longer handguard, you could extend it by putting this on here. Let me scoot this back a little bit. So you have that, and then also you have, it comes with this guy, which is a different kind of front iron sight. So it would actually lock in right here, and then you could remove this front post sight basically and give it more of the, there's an elongated version of the 416 that utilizes the, of course, longer barrel as well as this type of front iron sight as opposed to the shorter version. So, and then being that you do get two flash hiders for each option, so it will come from the factory with this one of these on. I've removed it and I typically run with a suppressor, which again I'll show you at the end of the video. So the last thing that it comes with as well is your manual. So it's completely in Chinese or Japanese or what have you, but I'm pretty sure it's Chinese. There is English writing down at the bottom, and it's pretty bad Chinglish, but it works. We all know how to take apart a version 2 gearbox. So alright guys, I'm gonna cut frame, I'm gonna zoom in, and we're gonna break apart the gun and go front, middle, and rear of the gun. So alright guys, so looking at the front half of the gun, as you can tell, like I briefly mentioned earlier, this is not the flash hider that it will come with. I use this for a suppressor modification that I put on, and I'll show you guys that at the end of the video. But you'll have your typical orange HK styled flash hider, and then as you move back you have your gas block, and then of course your full metal HK styled raised front handguard or receiver or rail set, whatever you want to call it, and then above that you do have one of two front post iron sights. So obviously there's a pretty nasty seam here, but it's nothing horrible. So I typically just leave this on because I do like to have something on the front of the gun. So this is actually a little bit shorter. It's if you were to leave it like this, it'd be almost more of a carbine length than like a full rifle length, which is kind of nice. So if you're taking tight corners, it does help with that. And you do have the option to remove this. So this rail setting has a quick detach feature. So you would basically just unscrew this, and then there's screws on the other side, and this whole rail system would just slide directly off. And HK designed the real steel version of that so that you could change basically your upper receiver, or you could change your barrel length to adapt to whatever type of engagement distance you needed, or I guess any field of operation you needed. So it's kind of a nice feature. And then as you can see here, you do have the Tamiya connector coming out of the receiver set. Now it's very, very tight fitting in there. When I actually changed the inner barrel and I was just kind of experimenting taking this thing off, it's a pain in the butt to try and get these wires back in there. So word to the wise, if you don't have a lot of time, don't take this receiver off. Just leave it as it is. This will be already sticking out. So yeah, and then of course you just connect your battery there, and then you put it in your PEC box or however you want to attach it. Or if you have the opposite one where it's wired to the rear, of course, then you wouldn't have this guy sticking out. But all right guys, that's pretty much it. I'm going to cut frame again, and then we're going to show you the middle of the Alright guys, now that we're looking at the upper and lower receiver, these of course as well are composed of metal. And again, I'm going to start from the top, work my way down. So starting from the rear, you do have your barrel HK styled rear iron sight. That's a mouthful to say. And you do have 4 different peep apertures. So starting from 1, it's going to be the largest, and then going all the way through to 4 will be your smallest. So it is not adjustable for windage or elevation, which is kind of interesting to note, but it's easily removable. Of course, you just take out that screw and it'll slide right off. My one complaint with this, it's actually the only complaint I've had with the gun so far, is the rear iron sight. It's got some pitting and some weird grooves in it, but again, that's very minimal, and that's nitpicking. So I was pleasantly surprised, as I mentioned before, about this gun. So, but you can remove it with a screw, and you know, I typically don't run with it. The apertures, you can probably hear that it wobbles pretty easily, so you'll make some noise doing that, and there's no way to really tighten that down. So that's just a word to the wise. Of course, you have your charging handle, pretty standard for an M4. Moving down, you have your bolt release, which doesn't really serve a purpose. It's just kind of there, just like most M4s. Again, you have your generic serial number, no HK trademarks, so being that it's one of the newer DBOYS models. You have your fire selector switch, which is a kind of a steel gray color, and it's very stiff to move, which I really appreciate. I hate loose fire selector switches. They really bug me. And then you have the safe, semi, and full auto with the 30 marking there, laser engraved into the gun. So that's nice. I like when that's engraved. So, and it's actually really nice quality. There's no like missed marks or anything like that. Also, it's a little bit loose on safe, but once you get to auto or safe, or I'm sorry, semi, it's a little loose on semi, but once you're on safe or full auto, it's very, very stiff, and it locks into place nicely. So you don't have to worry about bouncing that thing out of its selection for you. So yeah, and then your body pins, these are both metal, and they're very, very snug and fitting into the lower receiver. So that's also a plus. Sometimes these Chinese clones give you really loose body pins. They don't typically fit, or the actual holes that they fit in are too wide. So that can be annoying, especially the more you open up your gearbox and the more you open up your gun, the looser those things can become. So just a nice benefit that these things are not terribly loose, and I won't be losing the body pins. Your standard trigger guard, nothing fancy there. Your magazine does come with a high capacity magazine. Now these are actually kind of unique. Let me show you. So it's a high cap, as I mentioned, but there's no like little crank at the bottom. Hopefully you can see that. I apologize if you can't. I know the lighting's interesting. There you go. There's no winding wheel. You actually have to use an adjustment tool here in the field. Now at first I was like, wow, that sucks. It's a stupid idea. But the way it works is you would just keep winding it, and it actually stays wound the entire time this is full of BBs. So once it's fully wound, you don't ever have to wind it again if it works correctly. Sometimes these are hit and miss as well, as from what I've seen online, but mine feeds perfectly. I've cleaned it out a little bit. I resprayed it with a little bit of lubrication just to keep the thing, the spring feeding correctly. But yeah, for the entire, I believe it's 350 rounds I can get in there. I don't ever have to wind. So it's basically a massive mid-capacity mag. So that's definitely nice. I don't know where else you can get those, possibly online as well, but it's kind of a cool feature. And then again, this is another nice feature. It's got the Tango down style grip. All the HK models, at least the 416s, will provide the HK416 style Tango down grip. So I love these. They're a lot more ergonomic. They're very much more comfortable, and they have the perforation here for better grip, especially if you use gloves. So again, at the bottom, just your standard motor cover. There's no real ventilation, which I'll probably change in the near future, but for right now, it's serving its purpose. So, all right, guys, I'm going to cut frame again and just kind of move the gun backwards, just to focusing on the stock. All right, guys, now that we're looking at the rear half of the gun, as I mentioned before, this will actually come with an LE styled stock as opposed to the Magpul PTS stock. Now, I'm sure you can find bundles online where they actually come with this Magpul stock, making it look more like the SOCOM version, but this one, as I mentioned, again, did come with this LE, or you can purchase the other option where it's wired to the rear and it will provide you with a crane stock. But I'm going to talk about the LE stock first. It's actually a very nice composite plastic. It's not an ABS plastic, so there's really not too many problems with seams. It doesn't rattle, and it actually fit the buffer tube very, very nicely. And I've held other DBOYS guns before, and of course I've worked with the stocks before, and sometimes these can be pretty cheap feeling, but this one actually is pretty nice for what it's worth. So that's a nice pleasant surprise. The buffer tube has got a very, very nice metal material to it, and it doesn't have any pitting, no grooves where they're not supposed to be, and it's actually secured very, very nicely to the back half of the upper receiver, so or the lower receiver, excuse me. So there's no wobble, there's no fluctuation between when it's shouldered and not shouldered, so that's a nice plus. The reason I decided to go with the PTS stock though is A, because it's an even snugger fit. There's almost no wobble to it at all, and I wanted to give it the SOCOM look. If you guys have ever seen what a SOCOM 416 looks like, it's almost always got a Magpul PTS stock on it. So I definitely want to go with that. Plus the ergonomics of these things are incredible. They're very comfortable to shoulder. They come with a rubber butt pad, excuse me, if you want to utilize that, but I'm just going with the perforated one. So and same with the LE stock. To adjust it, you would just simply push down this lever. This goes the same way. You push down the lever and then it'll slide and lock into place. And once it does, you just push that down and that actually secures it so it won't ever change when you're running, things like that. It's an extra locking mechanism. So then to, of course, slide it back, do the same process. So that's really all I have to talk about on the rear half of the gun. The one disappointment too is it doesn't have any sling point attachments on the buffer tube. There's some quick detach features that the PTS stock has, but I don't really have any adapters that would utilize that right now. So I'll have to look into actually putting on a sling point attachment in the rear here, but for right now it's not a huge issue. Other than that, guys, I'm going to cut frame again and show you the other half. Alright guys, sorry about that, but my camera actually cut out. But jumping right into the gearbox, it's as to be expected a standard version 2 gearbox, but it's actually reinforced both internally and externally at the front end, which is really nice because that's where these things like to crack. And it's got a pretty standard 3/4 ported cylinder, which is typical for this length of an M4, and a nice added bonus is it's got 7mm bearings in it, so that was a really nice surprise. And the gearbox itself features an M120-ish spring. I say ish because you never really know what they tend to give you. They say that it's advertised as a 410 feet per second shooting gun, but it's also got a plastic nozzle and a plastic with one O-ring cylinder head, so you're going to want to expect some air leaks unless you replace those, or unless you get lucky. So expect it to realistically be shooting around 370 to maybe 390 feet per second. So somewhere in there. The last thing to talk about too is there is standard gear ratios, and there's a delayer chip on the sector gear, which is a nice added bonus as well. Shimming was okay. It's not the worst I've seen, but it's definitely nowhere great. And the greasing was actually pleasantly surprising as well. It was still the cheap Chinese type of grease, however, it was not over greased, and there was grease where it should be and no grease where it should not be. So that was definitely a nice surprise to see that there. So overall, that's the only other thing I have for the gearbox. So the last thing I'm going to show you guys is how I typically run with this gun in a game setting. So I'm going to cut frame and I'll show you that in a second. Alright guys, and like I mentioned, this is how I run the gun in a game situation. So I know you've already seen probably most of these attachments, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I will briefly describe them to you. So starting from the front, I do not use the JBU mock suppressor that I have. I actually have a Gemtech mock suppressor with quick detach functionality now. And I like it a little bit more. It's slightly shorter than the JBU, but it does have the licensing, patent numbers, and things like that on it, so I thought that was a cool addition. Moving back, I do run it with tan ladder rail covers as well as the tan or more dark earth, if you will. It's called an RVG front foregrip. It's not actually Magpul, but it's similar to the Magpul one. Still got the standard HK styled front iron sights on it. I feel like that's a cool addition. Working my way further back, I run with the ACOG. I think it's kind of got a cooler look to it, and a lot of the SOCOM style either have a holographic optic or they run with the ACOGs. I opted to go with the ACOG. And then lastly, I do run with the MBIS Magpul rear iron sight. Now I know it doesn't actually flip up because of the ACOG there, but I feel like it's a cool addition. And most of the SOCOM 416s run with Magpul iron sights, so that's why I went ahead and added that on there. So overall, guys, that is the HK416, the DBOYS HK416. I have to say I'm very, very happy with the purchase, and for what I got for it, it's full metal, the internals and externals, the quality that it did have. Now I guess it can vary being that it is a DBOYS, but overall, like I said, I've been very, very happy with it. With the few modifications I've had to do internally, I can't recommend it enough. So if you do have the money to go for the VFC, I would certainly do that over a DBOYS. But if you can come across this and you don't mind having to do some internal modifications to make it a little bit better as far as air seal, as far as consistency goes, I would say go for it. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments, and I'll certainly do everything I can to help answer them for you guys. And as always, thank you so much for watching. We'll check back with you later.